again, everybody. It's Rigas again from the Practice Research Agency, where every day we are trying to improve the way that we are collecting information, that we're analyzing information, that we're presenting insights to our clients. Because in the words of the great Bob Dylan, he not busy being born is busy dying. And of course, Bob was, or probably, I would bet, not referring to anything to do with market research in that statement, but rather he was referring to everything. He not busy being born is busy dying. And in that spirit, today, we would like to describe, in a way, the rebirth of that oldest hoary chestnut in the modern day market research, the tracker. It's a rebirth in the tracker for a number of ways, which we will discuss today. Firstly, it is the ability for us to now incorporate qualitative information, qualitative questions, obtain qualitative diagnostics inside a quantitative instrument, including a tracker at this point in time. Another major benefit is if this tracker now, which we are calling now the Qualantive tracker, in that spirit and in that paradigm, the tracker has moved from a relatively lifeless, static measurement instrument into a dynamic instrument that can provide insight at an ad hoc level, even outside the continuous tracking to the marketing teams. And we will discuss all of these topics today and why it is that the Qualantive method basically allows this. So firstly, let's just very briefly talk about where tracking has come from and what the opportunities are for tracking today because of what has changed. Okay, so the major thing that has changed in the past, let's say 30 years with tracking studies is that they have shifted. Fieldwork moved from face-to-face, door-to-door interviewers with questionnaires to online questionnaires fielded out to online panels. And that was, in fact, an absolutely major revolution for tracking, because prior to that, the major cost and the major problem with tracking was getting the tracking data, because it had to be obtained door to door. So there was a humongous cost involved in this continuous door-to-door sampling year after year. The majority of the cost of those trackers used to be spent on collecting the data, and it was often very simple data. It's the data that we're collecting today, brand health data and that sort of stuff, and a few other bits and pieces probably. But despite its simplicity in today's terms, it was difficult to obtain because we had to operate within the bounds of space and time in order to obtain this data. I had to get people in space and time, in their space and time, in order to get this data. So that was the first major revolution, and that changed things dramatically. It went from a situation where the financial emphasis of the tracker moved from collecting information to being able to do more with the tracker, because once the information collection component becomes easier and faster and cheaper, that leaves a lot of scope for other things to happen in the tracker, one of which is the reduction of cost in the tracker, which from memory did happen initially, at least when online fieldwork came on board, because of the humongous costs that were avoided by not going door to door. But the one thing that was never possible in tracking was any qualification of the results. There were numbers, but we didn't know why, and there had to be cross correlations with marketing activities in order to figure out why things may have gone up or down or whatever, because we did not have the ability to ask people anything beyond getting them to tick these boxes. And if we wanted to know anything beyond that qualitatively, there would have to be groups convened, not the people who answered the brand health surveys, mind you, different types of people convened in order to tackle different ad hoc problems. So not only was the tracker expensive and cumbersome and whatnot, it also did not provide any ability for qualitative information. So therefore, the receipt of that qualitative information was a significant additional cost and a significant amount of additional time. So the ability to include qualitative diagnostics inside a tracker is therefore another revolution, basically, inside tracking. It's another revolution inside tracking because it allows information to be obtained and diagnosed and presented without necessarily needing to go through that more traditional qualitative process, which is still necessary for many things, but not for everything. Not for everything, since we've had this technology available to us. Now, so that is the one benefit of the Qualantive tracker. The other benefit of the Qualantive tracker is because of that exact technology, because of the qualitative avatars that live inside the surveys, we are able to create a dynamic instrument in the sense that every wave, every reporting period, every time something, I guess, goes into field in terms of the tracking schedule, we have the ability to now add and remove ad hoc questions outside of the core metric brand health, let's say just brand health information, or whether it could be a satisfaction tracker, whether it's that kind of core information. But we're talking about outside that core information. Outside that core information, we can now remove and add various questions because of this qualitative technology. If our client needs to understand something in that quarter, in that reporting period, we simply are able to include it as part of the survey and present the results to them during the tracking reporting period. All within the cost, within the agreed cost of the tracker, with no additional cost, because the addition and removal of ad hoc questions inside the tracker is budgeted for and costed for right up front. So we know how many times we can add and remove ad hoc questions inside our tracker in the course of a year. That in itself is major, because as one of our clients has told us, who is doing this, they said that this allows us to use the tracker also as a UNA. But of course, in the course of 1 year, you can't squeeze every question that you need in the first quarter of the tracker, or whatever the first reporting period of the tracker. You would stretch out these needs as ad hoc needs and as ongoing insight needs over the course of the year of the tracker, and you would use the tracker in order to dip in and out of these issues and obtain answers, not just at a quantitative level, but at a qualitative level, and that is the revolution. So that is a major revolution, and that is enabled by the first revolution, which is the ability to have qualitative data collected and diagnosed inside a quantitative instrument. And then, of course, because of that, allows us to take a static tracker and turn it into a living, breathing, dynamic instrument that answers marketing questions all year, above and beyond the core metrics that the tracker is designed to obtain. Like we said, usually brand or customer health. That you know exactly what I'm getting at here. So the ability for the tracker to also function at least as a partial UNA. Now you think about, and not just as a partial UNA, but also as a concept tester. You can act, part of your ad hoc questioning can be to put in concepts into this tracker and obtain measurements on the concepts, qualitative and quantitative measurements on the concepts, advertising diagnostics. So actually, I'm going to now show you a list of things. I'll just pull this list up, and it's a list of things that we have measured over the course of 1 year. And it's not everything. This is just some of the things. It's quite a lot of the things, but it's definitely not everything. And now this is a multi-category tracker, which means that there are multiple opportunities across categories to get questions in and out. And so therefore we end up with quite a lot of qualitative ad hoc information from that tracker. But just to give you an idea, in the course of 1 year, the kind of insight, and we're talking qualitative insight here, but quantified, qualantive. Let's call it what it is, what we're calling it, qualantive insight. Brand and product preference drivers, reasons for not using particular brands or products. Off the top of my head, I think that we must have run 10 to 12 concept tests within the space of that tracker. Remember, it's multi-category. At least 6 advertising campaign tests. We examined the preferences for pack sizes. We examined preferences for flavors and tastes. We examined perceptions of certain expressions or brand names. What does X or Y mean to you? Which is pretty major kind of information to get inside a quantitative instrument, purely through the use of open-ended questions. Things like desired pack messaging and claims, what consumers want to see on pack, frequency and reasons for consumption and usage modes, usage occasions, types of usage of different products, drivers of things like health and quality, etc., etc. And there's more, right? And there's more. So again, reminder, this is a multi-category tracker. And of course, in a single category tracker, there wouldn't be this much going on all year because there are limitations in terms of what we can put into a quantitative instrument, and it's going to run for 12 or 15 minutes. So there are limitations, but again, over the course of a year, if you're using this tracker strategically and I guess tactically at the same time, we can actually answer a whole range of ad hoc marketing questions, ranging from this stuff and even including, we've even done little choice models, which I haven't even listed here, but little simple type choice model situations to simulate what happened if something was withdrawn and something put onto the shelf. So even, and not only just the quantification of the behavior, but why? Because there are qualitative open-ended questions about all of this stuff inside the tracker. So a lot of topics available to us. And again, and this is why our client said this becomes therefore used as a UNA, but within the same financial and methodological structure of our tracker. So we're not running things separately. We're not commissioning extra projects. And that sounds terrible in our industry, not commissioning extra projects, but the reality is they're not going to commission extra projects because the budget isn't necessarily there to do. So therefore, being able to do something like this suits the budgetary needs of the clients. So something like this becomes very important. And if you think about the financial savings of running a tracker and a UNA and concept test and some advertising tests inside that as well, inside the scope of this one instrument, and you think about the financial savings about that alone, I mean, that in itself alone is an intriguing concept to be able to get this much insight at much reduced costs when you compare it to all of the added costs that were necessary prior to methodologies like this being available to us. So we will leave it at that today. As a summary, the Qualantive system, because of its ability to synthesize qual and quant information in the same survey instrument, is now transforming already tracking studies into dynamic instruments with a significant ad hoc component, answering and able to answer and provide deep insight into a lot of different marketing issues throughout the year. So something to think about. So thank you very much again if you've listened this far, and we will be speaking again very soon. Thank you.